The galaxy was wide and endless, stars glowing like cold fires in the dark sky, and drifting in the middle of this vast sea of silence was something that once made empires tremble. It was not a normal ship. It was a living dragon made of steel and bone, a war beast crafted by alien hands to fight their battles. But now it floated in silence, broken, wounded, and forgotten, its giant wings of metal bent, its long body full of scars, and its eyes dim like dying suns. No one dared to go near it. The stories spread fast through space stations and colonies. They said the dragon was cursed. They said it had lost its heart, its roar, its fire, and that anyone who touched it would meet death. Scavenger ships circled at a distance, hoping to pick parts from its carcass, but none were brave enough to land inside. The ship was alive, and even in its sadness, it sometimes moved just enough to make hunters flee in fear. But then came a small human repair ship, simple and old, with scratches on its sides and engines that coughed smoke when they burned too hot. Inside sat one man, a mechanic named Jack, his hands rough with grease, his eyes sharp from years of fixing what others had already given up on. He was no soldier, no great hero, just a man who looked at broken things and could not leave them behind. When he saw the alien dragon drifting alone in space, something inside him refused to turn away. He guided his ship close, his heart beating hard. As the massive body of the dragon grew larger and larger in his window, every scar looked like a wound that had never healed. Its wings stretched across miles of metal. Its tail was broken and hung like a lifeless chain. Its head leaned forward as if it was tired of holding itself up. Jack had fixed machines before. He had worked on engines, weapons, and even ships. But this was no normal machine. This was alive. This was a soul. And he could feel it. Docking his small ship was like landing on the side of a sleeping beast. The claws of the docking arm touched the surface with a metallic click. And the moment it touched, Jack felt the dragon shiver under him. It was faint, like a sigh from a dying creature. He closed his eyes for a moment, wondering if he was insane. No one sane would do this, but he had already made his choice. He stepped out, the floor of the dragon ship creaking under his boots, half steel, half living tissue that pulsed softly as if weak blood ran through it. The air was thick, strange, and heavy. It smelled not of machines, but of something old, like the breath of an ancient cave. Lights flickered along the walls, glowing weakly as though the creature was trying to watch him but had no strength left. "Easy there," Jack whispered, though he did not know if it understood him. "I'm not here to hurt you." His voice echoed softly, and he felt ridiculous talking to metal and bone. Yet something deep in his chest told him the dragon heard. As he walked deeper inside, he passed giant ribs of metal that curved like bones over his head. He saw torn wires sparking faintly like nerves cut open. He saw broken panels dripping glowing fluid that smelled of ozone and iron. The deeper he went, the stronger the silence. Became no hum of engines, no living roar. Just the slow, weak thump of something that might have been a heart. Each beat was soft, fading, almost ready to stop. Jack stopped near a large, glowing chamber, a place that seemed to breathe, and he realized this was the core. Not just an engine, but the heart of the dragon. He laid his hand against the surface, feeling warmth, and for a moment a shock ran through him, not painful but strange, like sadness itself had entered his skin. He saw in his mind a picture of the dragon flying once, proud and strong, its roar shaking fleets. And then he saw it fall, betrayed, abandoned, left to die. He pulled his hand back, his breath heavy, and he muttered to himself, "You're not just a ship." He almost laughed. The thought was too wild, but it was the truth. This thing was alive, and it was suffering. Behind him the corridor shifted, a low growl humming through the walls. Not angry, but suspicious. The dragon was aware of him now, its dim eyes glowing faintly somewhere far down the hall. Watching him, judging him. It did not trust him. No one had come to help before. Why would a human care? Jack swallowed hard, but he did not run. He placed both hands on the core again and leaned close. "I don't care what they say about you," he whispered. "You're not cursed. You're just broken, and broken things can be fixed." His words trembled, not because he doubted them, but because he feared the dragon would not believe. The chamber answered with a faint tremor, like a dying creature sighing once more. The eyes dimmed again, and the silence grew deeper. But Jack did not move away. He stayed there, one small human inside the belly of a war dragon that the galaxy had left behind outside. Stars drifted silently. Scavenger ships waited, whispering over comms, wondering if the fool human would die inside. The galaxy thought the dragon was lost forever. But Jack felt something different. Deep inside, he believed the story of the Saddest dragon was not yet over, and as he stood there with grease on his hands and fire in his heart, he made an unspoken promise. He would not leave until he gave the dragon back its roar. The dragon ship floated in the deep black of space like a wounded beast, its massive wings bent and its tail dragging lifelessly behind it. Inside its hollow body was a silence so heavy, it felt like grief itself. Jack, the human mechanic, walked slowly through the corridors, every step echoing as if the dragon was listening. His boots scraped across a floor made of half steel and half living flesh. He had never seen anything like this in his life. The walls pulsed faintly, glowing veins of light running along the ribs that arched overhead. They looked like bones, like a giant skeleton wrapped in metal. Here and there he saw broken wires sparking faintly, dripping fluid that hissed when it touched the floor. He stopped, kneeling near one crack in the wall, pressing his hand against it. The wall felt warm, too warm for cold metal. It was alive, there was no doubt, and it was hurting. Jack closed his eyes and listened. At first there was only silence, but then, faint and slow, he heard it. A deep, muffled thump. It was not the thrum of an engine. It was not the vibration of a machine. It was a heartbeat, slow and weak, as if each beat took all the strength left in the dragon's body. Jack felt a chill run through him. He had fixed machines that had been called dead before, but never had he tried to mend something that was both alive and machine. The dragon shifted, the walls trembling slightly, its faint eyes flickering too. Life far down the corridor, Jack froze. His breath held in his chest, then a sound rolled through the hall, low and rumbling, like a growl but filled with sorrow rather than fury. The dragon knew he was here. It was watching him, judging him. "I'm not your enemy," Jack whispered, his voice bouncing off the walls. "I just want to help." His words seemed too small inside a body so massive, too soft to reach ears that had only known commands and battles. Yet he spoke anyway, because broken things deserved someone who would not give up. He walked deeper, following the faint glow of the veins until he reached the dragon's heart chamber. It was vast, wide enough for ships to land in. At the center was the core, a glowing sphere trapped inside metal ribs. It pulsed weakly, each flickered dimmer than the last. Jack stared at it, grease still smudged on his hands, his chest tightening. He felt as if he was looking at something that should never have been abandoned. "Why did they leave you?" Jack muttered to himself. Though he already knew the answer, war was cruel. Soldiers were replaced when they broke, weapons discarded when they failed, and this dragon, once feared across stars, had been left behind when it could no longer roar. The dragon groaned again, its voice filling the chamber, not words, not language, but a sound that was heavy with loneliness. Jack stumbled forward, gripping a pipe for balance, and then to his shock, he felt something press into his mind. Not like words, but like feelings. Grief. Betrayal. Endless cold silence. Jack staggered, his breath sharp, and he touched the glowing core with one trembling hand. Heat surged into him. Not fire, but raw emotion. He gasped, images flooding his mind. The dragon flying once, its wings stretched wide across space, its roar breaking fleets apart, then darkness, chains, abandonment, drifting alone as centuries passed, waiting for a hand that never came. Until now he pulled his hand back, panting, his heart racing as if it had carried some of that sadness into himself. "You're not just a ship," he whispered, his voice shaking. "You're alive, and you've been left to die." His words echoed back, and the dragon's dim eyes narrowed faintly. Watching him, Jack sat down on a broken panel, running a hand through his messy hair. his mind racing. What could he do? He was just a mechanic, not a warrior, not a commander, not a healer, but maybe that was enough. Maybe what the dragon needed was not another master, not another commander shouting orders. Maybe it just needed someone who saw it as more than a weapon. He stood again, stubborn fire in his chest, and he shouted into the chamber, his voice bouncing against the ribs of metal and bone. I don't care what the galaxy calls you, cursed, broken, useless. I won't leave you like this, you hear me? I'll fix you. His voice cracked, but it was strong enough to carry. The dragon's eyes flared, faint light glowing brighter for one heartbeat before dimming again, a low groan rolling out. Suspicion, disbelief, but not rejection. It was. Listening, Jack took a slow step toward the core again, holding out his hand. You don't have to believe me right away, he said softly now, but I don't walk away from broken things, not ships, not engines, not even you, no matter how big you are. Silence answered, heavy, almost crushing, but then the floor beneath him vibrated slightly, not violently, but like a weak nod. Jack smiled faintly, even though his chest was still tight with fear. He dropped his pack and pulled out his tools. A welder, wires, scanners, things too small for a ship this size, but it was all he had. He looked at the glowing veins around the chamber, at the ribs cracked and bent, and he muttered, one fix at a time. He set to work, sparks flying as he patched wires and sealed leaks. The dragon watched, still weak, still doubtful. But it did not push him away. For the first time in decades, someone was touching its wounds, not to tear pieces away, but to heal them. Outside, the scavenger ship circled closer, watching with hungry eyes, waiting for the dragon to finally die so they could feast on its bones. They laughed at the lone human mechanic who dared step inside, calling him a fool. But inside, a bond had begun to grow. One small promise between a man with dirty hands and a dragon with a broken heart. And though its roar was still silent, in that moment, for the first time in centuries, the dragon dared to hope. Jack had spent hours crawling through the endless corridors of the dragon ship, sparks from his small welder flashing against walls that once burned with power. He worked with quiet determination, patching what he could, touching wires, sealing cracks, replacing what little he had in his toolkit. Yet no matter how much he repaired, he knew these fixes were nothing compared to the beast's real wounds. The problem was not just broken circuits or torn metal. It was something deeper, something buried in the heart of the dragon. When he finally sat down, sweat rolling down his forehead, he leaned against one of the glowing ribs and let out a long breath. His muscles ached, his hands were black with grease, and still the dragon remained silent, its dim eyes flickering faintly from far away, its heartbeat soft and tired. He had tried to mend its body, but he could feel its spirit resisting, refusing to trust him. He closed his eyes, remembering the images he had seen when he touched the core, the memories of battles, betrayal, and abandonment. The dragon had been created as a weapon, forced to fight for a race that later left it drifting when it could no longer serve. To it, every hand that had ever touched its walls had been one of control or cruelty. So why should it believe this human was different? Jack looked up at the faint glow of the veins around him and spoke softly. You don't need another commander, do you? He said. You don't need orders. You don't need chains. He paused, his voice heavy but steady. You just need someone who won't walk away. His words echoed through the hollow chamber, and though no answer came, the silence felt less empty. He stood, wiped his hands on his shirt, and walked slowly toward the core chamber again. The giant sphere pulsed faintly as if struggling to breathe. He placed his hand on it once more, closing his eyes, and whispered, I don't make promises unless I mean them. I'll fix you, not just because you're powerful, not because of what you can do, but because no one deserves to die alone. The dragon stirred, the floor trembling slightly beneath his boots. Its eyes glowed a shade brighter, faint, but noticeable. It was not trust, not yet, but curiosity, suspicion beginning to bend into something else. Jack pulled out his tools again, but this time he did not start patching blindly. Instead, he sat cross-legged before the core, speaking as he worked, his voice calm, steady, like someone talking to a wounded animal. I had an old ship once, he said, soldering a wire into place. A piece of junk, leaking fuel, engine stuttering every time I tried to fly. He chuckled softly. Everyone told me to scrap it. Said it wasn't worth the effort, but I couldn't. I fixed it part by part, until it flew again. Wasn't the fastest, wasn't the prettiest, but it was mine, and it lived again. The dragon's heart thumped louder just once, and Jack smiled faintly. You're like that ship, but bigger, stronger, older, sadder. Maybe, he continued, tightening a bolt. But if I can bring you back even a little, then maybe the galaxy will see you're not cursed. Maybe they'll see you for what you are, something worth saving. The chamber rumbled softly, not in anger, but like a breath of thought. The dragon was listening. Jack worked for hours, replacing panels, reconnecting broken nerves of wire, his movements careful, gentle, unlike the cold alien engineers who had once forced repairs with commands and threats. His touch was patient. His words filled the silence. He told stories of his childhood fixing scrap metal, of the times he had been laughed at for wasting time on lost causes, of the one lesson his father had taught him, that nothing was truly worthless as long as someone cared enough to mend it. At one point, the dragon shuddered violently, a growl shaking through the chamber walls. Jack nearly dropped his tool, but he didn't back away. Instead, he pressed his hand against the core again and said firmly, I'm not leaving. His voice sharp, his eyes locked on the glowing sphere. You can push me away, you can scare me, but I won't walk, I promised you, and I'll keep that promise. The growl faded, the vibrations settling into silence again. The dragon's eyes dimmed, then blinked faintly like a flicker of acceptance. Jack leaned back, breathing hard, his heart pounding, and a smile pulled at his lips. That's it, he muttered. You're starting to believe me. But far outside, danger was growing. Scavenger, ships drifted closer, their captains whispering greedily, watching the faint flickers of life returning to the dragon. If the beast was waking, they had to strip it quickly before it regained strength. They prepared to dock, weapons armed, unaware that inside the belly of the dragon, a bond was being forged. Jack could not see them yet, but he felt the pressure building. The air inside the chamber growing heavier, the dragon knew they were coming. Its eyes narrowed faintly, its body trembling with helpless rage. It wanted to fight, but it was still too weak. Jack grabbed his welder again, sparks flying, as he rushed to finish reconnecting a massive conduit. I know, he said quickly. They're coming, but you're not alone anymore. We'll get through this, just give me time. The dragon groaned, its growl low but filled with a new sound. Trust, fragile and trembling, but real. For the first time in centuries, the saddest dragon in the galaxy began to let someone in. And for the first time, Jack felt he was not just fixing a machine, he was keeping a promise to a living soul. And as the scavenger fleet closed in, Jack's words echoed one last time in the chamber, words that rang louder than any repair. I'll fix you, I swear it. Even if the whole galaxy calls me a fool, I'll give you your roar back. The stars outside glittered cold and sharp like knives waiting in the dark. The galaxy was watching, though it did not know it yet. For deep in the empty void, the scavenger fleet had arrived. Their ships circled the wounded dragon like vultures above a dying beast, black hulks with claws and drills ready to tear its flesh for parts. Their comms hissed with laughter, cruel and greedy. Look at it, one voice said. The cursed dragon, still breathing but too weak to roar. Another laughed. By the time we're done, we'll strip its bones clean, sell its heart for a fortune. Their words carried across the silence of space, unaware that inside the dragon a human mechanic was listening to the faint echoes of the beast's grief. Jack wiped sweat from his brow, sparks bursting from the conduit he was repairing. The veins of light around the chamber pulsed brighter now, not strong yet but alive. He could feel the dragon stirring, its dim eyes flickering with faint fire, but when the scavenger ships drew closer, the dragon shivered in frustration. It wanted to fight. It wanted to rise. Yet its body still betrayed it. Too weak, too broken. Easy, Jack muttered, his voice firm as he tightened a bolt with shaking hands. Don't waste what little strength you've got left. He looked around at the trembling walls. the faint glow of the core struggling to steady itself. "Just hold on. I'll give you enough to fight back," the dragon growled, the sound low and rolling through the corridors like distant thunder, its distrust fading into desperation. It was relying on Jack now, and Jack felt the weight of that trust like a stone pressing on his chest. One man against a fleet. One mechanic against scavengers who had destroyed ships 10 times stronger than his. But he refused to back away through a crack in the dragon's hull. Jack saw the scavenger ships approach, their claws glinting, drills spinning. They latched onto the dragon's wings, tearing open panels, ripping flesh metal apart. The dragon roared silently inside, unable to push them off. Jack clenched, his fists anger flashing through him. "They think you're nothing but bones to be picked," he growled. "We'll prove them wrong." He sprinted down the corridor, his boots clanging against the floor. The dragon shifted weakly beneath him, guiding him, showing him where to go. He reached a control chamber, half alive and half machine. Wires hanging like torn nerves, he slammed his pack down and pulled out his tools. Come on, he muttered, his fingers moving fast, reconnecting circuits, rerouting power, sparks flying as panels lit faintly for the first time in years. The dragon's heart thumped harder, lights along its ribs glowing stronger, its eyes flickered, and a faint hum rolled through its body. It was trying to wake, to move. Jack shouted over the crackle of his welder, "Yes, that's it, fight. Give me just a little more and we'll show them who you are." Outside, the scavenger fleet began drilling into the dragon's spine, cutting deep, ready to reach its core. Alarms blared weakly inside. The dragon writhed in pain, walls shaking violently. Jack nearly lost his balance, but he held on. "Don't give in," he shouted. "Not yet." One scavenger captain sneered over comms. "The beast still twitches, but it's finished. One more push and the heart is ours." But as he said it, the dragon stirred. One wing twitched, metal grinding against the claws of the scavenger ships. Panic rippled through the fleet. "It's moving," another voice cried. "Impossible. It's dead. It was supposed to be dead." Jack grinned through gritted teeth, sparks flying across his face as he sealed the last connection. "Not dead," he said softly. "Just waiting for someone to care." The conduit roared to life. Energy surged through the veins of the ship. The glow brightened like blood rushing through new arteries. The dragon let out a sound, not yet a roar, but a long, low growl that carried into space like a whisper of storms. The scavenger fleet staggered back, some pulling their claws free in panic. "It's waking," one shouted. "But it can't." Not after all this time. Yet they did not retreat. Greed blinding them. They opened fire. Plasma blasts striking against the dragon's broken armor, sparks exploding across its wings. Jack shielded his eyes, shouting, "You can take it. Just a little longer." The dragon strained, its heart beating stronger now, each pulse shaking the chamber. Jack felt the vibration run through his bones. He knew it was not enough, not yet. The repairs were still incomplete. The dragon could not fight alone, but it was no longer completely helpless. Jack ran to another panel, pulling wires with his bare hands, his skin burning. He gritted his teeth, forcing connections together. "Come on, you've got one engine left, give it to me," he begged, his voice breaking. The dragon answered. With a deep rumble, its eyes blazing brighter, the engine coughed, then roared weakly to life. The scavenger ship scattered as the dragon's body trembled, heat spilling from its vents, its tail twitching like a whip. The glow of fire building faintly in its jaws, though still too weak to unleash. Jack slumped against the panel, panting, his chest heaving, and he laughed breathlessly. "That's it. That's enough to scare them." Outside, the scavenger captains cursed, their fleet circling warily, afraid now, unsure if they faced a corpse or a monster reborn. The dragon turned its glowing eyes inward, staring at Jack, not with sorrow, not with distrust, but with a spark of hope. Its heartbeat stronger now, its growl carrying a promise. It would fight. It would rise. It would roar again. Jack wiped the sweat from his face and nodded, determination burning in his eyes. "I told you I'd fix you," he whispered. "And I'm not done yet." Outside, the scavenger fleet prepared for another strike, and inside, man and dragon prepared to stand together, their bond tested in fire, their fight just beginning. The dragon shivered as the cold of space pressed against its cracked armor. the stars staring like silent witnesses to its pain. Jack's hands were raw and bleeding from hours of repairs, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. Not when the scavenger fleet still hovered like dark shadows above, their drills spinning, their claws ready to rip. Almost there, Jack muttered, tightening another bolt. The dragon flexed its wings weakly, letting out a low rumble that vibrated through the corridors. He could feel the energy rising just a little more and they would have a chance. But time was slipping through their fingers. The first ship of the scavenger fleet dove toward the dragon, drills sparking against the armor, metal screeching. The dragon lashed out with a tail, knocking it back. But the other ships pressed in, relentless, greedy. Jack grabbed a plasma torch, his eyes wide. "No," he shouted. "You're not taking it today." Sparks flew as he cut through a support beam, sending a shower of molten metal onto one of the attackers. The scavenger ship shrieked and pulled away, its pilot cursing. The dragon's eyes glowed brighter, a faint pulse of fire building in its throat. It flexed its wings again, trembling but determination shining through the pain. It wanted to fight, wanted to survive, wanted to see the human who had not given up on it. Jack ran along the wing corridor, checking every conduit, every power line. "Hold on," he whispered. "Just a little more, and you'll be able to fly again." He reached the main engine, sparks and smoke pouring from it, the core flickering like a dying star. He gritted his teeth, reconnecting wires, forcing energy back into the system. The scavenger fleet tried to regroup, sensing the dragon was waking. "It's not supposed to be able to move," one captain shouted, panic in their voice. "It should be dead." But the dragon had other plans. A low growl resonated through the hull, shaking metal and filling the void. Jack wiped blood from his forehead, his hands trembling, but his eyes were steady. "That's it, don't give up now," he said, watching the dragon's chest rise and fall, each heartbeat stronger than the last. The glow of energy along its spine flickered into life, veins of light running through broken armor. Suddenly, a scavenger ship breached the hull at the tail section, ripping a hole and sparks flying. The dragon reared back, swinging its tail, but the ship latched on, trying to drill into the main engine. Jack leapt, plasma torch in hand, cutting through the support holding the ship, sending it tumbling into space. The dragon roared, a low, guttural sound that shook the corridors. Fire, licking its jaws, wings flexing, and for a moment it felt like hope. Real hope. It could fight, it could rise, it could survive. Jack ran to the cockpit, overriding the emergency systems, rerouting all remaining power to the engines, his hands moving fast, sweat and blood mixing, the glow of the core brightening, a pulse of life returning to the dragon. The scavenger fleet hesitated, unsure now, their drills spinning uselessly, their claws scraping metal that was stronger than it looked. The dragon's eyes locked on the nearest ship, fire building in its throat, wings stretching, trembling. But, "Ready." Jack looked up at the dragon, shouting over alarms, "Now! You can do it now!" The dragon inhaled, fire igniting in its chest, the light glowing brighter, a roar building inside, not yet a full eruption, but enough to make the scavengers flinch. One ship tried to charge, but the dragon whipped its tail, knocking it away. Plasma bursts from its claws and teeth, now threatening the scavenger pilots. Jack kept working, rerouting power, sealing conduits, every movement critical, every second a chance for survival. The dragon felt the strength returning, heart pounding, wings stretching further, a tremor of life running through its body. It could see the human, small but relentless, and it understood. It was not alone, it had an ally, a friend who had risked everything to save it. The scavenger fleet regrouped, panic spreading. "It's alive! It's moving on its own!" One captain screamed, orders shouted, but hesitation filled their ranks, uncertainty creeping into their hearts. The dragon was no longer the easy prize they had expected. Jack wiped his face, blood and sweat stinging his eyes. He forced the last. Connections. Sparks flying. A hum of energy vibrating through the corridors. The dragon's engines coughed, then roared, light flooding through broken panels, wings lifting, trembling, but alive. The dragon flexed its neck, fire burning brighter, eyes blazing. It roared low and terrifying, a sound that carried through space, rattling the scavenger fleet. They pulled back, unsure, afraid, and for the first time, the dragon felt power, felt hope. felt life. Jack fell to his knees, exhausted but smiling. "You did it," he whispered, looking up at the dragon, its gaze fixed on him, a silent understanding passing between them. They had survived the first wave, but the fight was far from over. The dragon's wings stretched fully, flexing, the fire in its throat pulsing like a heartbeat, engines humming, ready to rise, to strike, to reclaim what had been taken, and Jack, bleeding and tired, knew this was only the beginning. The scavenger fleet would return, and when they did, the dragon would be ready. For now, man and dragon stood together, battered, but alive. The void of space around them watching silently, waiting for what would come next, and in the heart of the dragon. For the first time in many cycles, a small spark of hope glimmered, a promise that it could smile again. Jack looked at the stars, through the cracked hull. "We'll fix everything," he said softly, "one step at a time." The dragon's rumble answered him, a sound of agreement, not words, but trust, and in that trust the galaxy held its breath, waiting for the impossible to rise. The dragon floated in the silence of space, wounded but alive, its giant wings stretching slowly as faint energy pulsed through its spine like blood beginning to flow again. The scavenger fleet had backed off for now, scattered in confusion. But Jack knew it wouldn't last. They would regroup, they would return, and when they did, they would come harder, stronger, determined to tear the dragon apart. Inside the living warship, Jack moved through the corridors like a man on borrowed time. His hands were blistered, his shirt torn, and every part of his body ached, but his eyes still burned with fire. "Just a little more," he whispered to himself, tightening the last seal on a backup engine valve. "Just a little more and you'll be able to smile." The dragon rumbled beneath his feet, a low, steady sound like thunder resting in the bones. Its eyes glowed brighter now, watching Jack wherever he went, not with suspicion anymore, but with something gentler, something like gratitude. Jack could feel it, not in words, not in thoughts, but in how the ship moved with him now, how it breathed when he breathed, how its systems lit up when he touched them. The bond was real. As Jack stepped into the central chamber, the heart of the dragon pulsed with steady rhythm, veins of light glowing along the walls. No longer dim, no longer flickering. He placed his hand on the core again and felt the warmth, not heat from a machine, but warmth like the sun after winter. The dragon was healing slowly, painfully, but it was healing. "Do you know what a smile is?" Jack asked, leaning against the glowing structure, his voice low and tired. "It's when pain takes a break, even for a second." He paused, his eyes glassy. "I don't think you've smiled in a long, long time," the dragon answered with a soft hum, a breath through the walls that made Jack feel like the ship was exhaling for the first time in centuries. Suddenly, warning lights flashed across the corridor, red pulses stinging the walls like alarms in an old battlefield. Jack's head snapped up. "They're back," he muttered, running to the control interface. Screens flickered to life, showing the scavenger ships forming a new pattern, larger, tighter, more aggressive. They weren't here to scavenge anymore. They were here to kill. Jack turned to the core and shouted, "You have to move!" The dragon didn't hesitate this time. Its body trembled as it pulled power from the repaired systems, wings slowly spreading, engines humming low like a sleeping storm waking up. Its massive jaw flexed, fire glowing between its teeth. Its tail cracked like a whip behind it. It didn't feel like death anymore. It felt like rebirth. Jack sprinted to the flight control deck, half destroyed but still functional. The dragon's interface had changed, no longer just wires and buttons, but now pulsing light and organic patterns responding to his presence. He placed his hand on the console and the ship responded instantly, a screen opening like an eye locking onto the enemy fleet. Outside, the scavengers didn't wait. They fired, streams of plasma cutting through the dark toward the dragon's side. The beast turned, slowly at first, then faster, one engine flaring to life as Jack rerouted emergency power to propulsion. The first wave of shots slammed into its shoulder, making it jerk, but it didn't fall. Instead, it roared, a deep, echoing blast that shook the emptiness of space, a sound that hadn't been heard in 100 years, and it made the scavengers hesitate, even fear. Jack adjusted the thrusters and grinned, blood dripping down his arm. "That's more like it," he said. "Let's give them something to remember." The dragon moved now, not like a broken relic, but like a true warship. Slow but powerful, graceful despite its scars, it swept through the enemy formation like a wave through sand. Its mouth opened wide and fire poured from it, not yet full strength, but enough to burn a path through 3 enemy vessels, their pieces tumbling through the stars. Inside, Jack could feel every movement, the way the ship tilted, the way it surged forward, the way it fought back. It was no longer just a ship, and he was no longer just a mechanic. They were working together, a pair of survivors daring the galaxy to try them again. The scavenger captain screamed orders, but fear cracked their voices. They had come for a corpse and now faced a monster, one powered by fire and stubborn human will. More ships exploded, wreckage lighting up the void. One enemy vessel fired a desperate torpedo. Jack saw it too late. The blast hit near the dragon's throat, shaking everything. Systems flickered, and a sharp screech filled the halls. Jack flew backward, hitting a wall hard, pain exploding in his back. "Stay with me," he gasped, crawling back to the control panel, blood in his mouth. The lights around him dimmed. The heartbeat of the dragon staggered but didn't stop. The dragon growled, fire building in its core, not rage, but fury, pain, survival. It opened its mouth and let loose a bellow so loud it cracked the stars around it, then unleashed a stream of white-blue fire that lit up the battlefield, slicing through the remaining ships like paper. The fight was over. Silence returning slowly, pieces of scavenger vessels floating like ashes. Jack lay slumped against the console, breathing hard, blood soaking his shirt. The lights around him brightened slowly, soft and warm. The dragon's breath pulsing through the ship like a gentle wave. It had survived. They had survived. And then, something happened. Something small, barely noticeable. But Jack saw it. The dragon's massive face appeared on the screen, and there, in the eyes that once held only sorrow, was something else. Something new. A faint shift in shape, a soft curve in the jaw, a tiny twitch in the corner of the mouth. A smile, not wide, not perfect, but real. Jack laughed through the pain, leaning back. "Told you I'd make you smile." The dragon rumbled softly like a giant purring after a long battle, and for the first time, the saddest creature in the galaxy wasn't sad anymore. It had a reason to rise again, and his name was Jack. The dragon drifted through space like a ghost reborn, its wings now fully stretched, its fire slowly glowing inside its chest like a sunrise trying to rise after 100 years of night. The scavenger fleet was gone, burned, scattered, and broken. Their twisted wreckage now floated silently in the black void like a warning to any who dared approach. Inside the dragon's heart, Jack lay back against a glowing console, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Blood soaked his torn shirt, but his eyes were still open, still focused, still burning. The battle had nearly killed him, but he wasn't thinking about death. He was smiling. The dragon's interior hummed with a strange, warm energy. Not just systems rebooting, not just power returning, but something more, something alive. The ship, the beast, the war machine, was healing, not only its armor and systems, but its soul. It had smiled for a moment, even if small, even if uncertain. It had smiled at him. Jack blinked slowly, forcing himself to sit up. Pain screamed through his back, but he ignored it. "That was one hell of a roar," he muttered, his voice hoarse. "I think they heard that all the way in Sector 9. The dragon gave a soft rumble in return, the lights along the walls glowing gently in sync with Jack's breath. But the peace didn't last long. A new signal lit up on the console, not scavengers, not pirates, but something worse. A patrol from the Galactic Authority, heavy cruisers painted in silver and gold, the so-called peacekeepers of the galaxy, and they had locked onto the dragon's coordinates. Jack stared at the blinking red alert, his jaw tightening. "Of course," he said bitterly. "Now they show up." The Galactic Authority had always wanted the dragon destroyed. They feared its power. hated that it had once obeyed no council, no government, only its creators. The same alien race that abandoned it. Now the authority would see it as a threat rising again, and they wouldn't ask questions. They would come to erase it. The dragon's low growl echoed around him, not in fear, but in anger, in pain. It remembered those ships, it remembered the betrayal. Jack stood slowly, his legs weak but steady. "No," he whispered, placing his hand against the wall. "You're not going to fight them." The lights dimmed as if the dragon didn't understand, or maybe disagreed. "They're not like the scavengers," Jack continued. "They'll come in with laws and orders and missiles all dressed up as peace." He looked up toward the ceiling as if speaking to the dragon's eyes. "If you attack them even once, you'll be hunted forever." The dragon didn't move. Jack clenched. His fists then added softer. "But if we run now, we might get far enough to hide, to disappear." He paused. "We earned that chance, didn't we?" The dragon remained still for several long seconds. Then slowly, with a deep vibrating breath, it turned, its wings tucked close, engines burning low and silent. It began to drift away from the wreckage, away from the location of the fight, away from the red warning blips flashing closer. The warship fled like a shadow slipping beneath starlight, and Jack exhaled, finally feeling the tension leave his chest. He limped down the hallway back toward the core chamber, sparks flickering. Gently from still healing walls, the floor felt more stable now, more solid, as if the dragon's body was remembering what strength felt like. "Where are we going?" he asked aloud, smiling faintly. "Don't suppose you've got a vacation planet in mind?" A panel beside him lit up with star maps, blinking red, yellow, and blue points marking travel paths and dangerous sectors. One system blinked green. A quiet nebula with no known patrols or settlements. Jack raised an eyebrow. "You've been thinking ahead, huh?" The dragon hummed in response, and Jack laughed through cracked ribs. "Smart beast," he muttered. Hours passed in silence as the ship moved toward the chosen nebula, its large form gliding through space like a bird who had forgotten how to fly but was learning again. Jack slept against the wall near the heart chamber, tools still in his lap, his head resting on his arm. The dragon's lights dimmed gently, keeping quiet for him, like a mother letting her child sleep without disturbance. When he awoke, he felt the shift in gravity. The dragon was slowing, arriving, hiding among thick clouds of glowing dust and swirling gas. It was peaceful for the first time in ages. Jack walked slowly to the observation deck. A large window cracked but clear enough to see outside. The nebula looked like a dream. Soft pinks and golds and endless blues, drifting gently like underwater waves. He sat down, watching the colors swirl, and felt the dragon relax around him, the walls softer, the lights pulsing like a calm breath. Then a soft chirp came from the console near him. A new panel opened up with an unfamiliar symbol, strange at first. But then it shifted, changed, transformed into something human, a rough sketch of a face. Smiling, Jack stared at it for a long moment, not breathing, then reached out and touched the image gently. The dragon had drawn it, using its systems to send a message, not with words, but with feeling. It was smiling again, not just once, but now by choice. Jack's throat tightened, emotion crashing through him like waves. "You really mean it," he whispered, tears forming in the corners of his eyes. "You're not just a ship anymore, are you?" The dragon pulsed softly in, reply warm, steady, alive. Out there, the galaxy still whispered about the cursed war dragon that could never smile. The beast built only for war, for fire, for destruction. But they were wrong, because now in the heart of a nebula far from all eyes, the saddest dragon in the universe had finally learned something new. It had learned how to feel safe, it had learned how to smile, and it had done so. Because one human had refused to walk away, Jack sat quietly on the edge of the observation deck, legs crossed, a steaming cup of recycled coffee in his hands. The nebula beyond the window stretched like a glowing sea of color. Blues, golds, purples drifting in slow motion through the vacuum. The dragon warship rested at the heart of this forgotten place, hidden within the cosmic fog where no patrols came, where no laws reached. It was safe here, The silence inside the ship wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't the silence of loneliness or grief. It was calm, peaceful, like the dragon was finally breathing without pain. Jack looked up at the ceiling as the walls gently pulsed with warm light. The systems had not only stabilized, they were thriving. Circuits that had once sparked with decay now glowed softly. Energy flowed like blood, and the floor felt alive beneath his feet. "You're healing faster than I thought," Jack murmured, sipping his coffee. "You're not just surviving anymore. You're living," the dragon answered with a soft vibration under his boots like a satisfied purr. It had been weeks since the battle, since the last scavenger ship turned to dust in the dragon's fire, since the Galactic Authority cruisers gave up their pursuit at the edge of the nebula, unwilling to chase a legend into a storm of cosmic clouds. And in those quiet days, something beautiful had happened. The dragon had begun to speak, not in words, not in voices, but through lights, images, gentle sounds that moved through its hallways. It would flicker old memories on the walls, small holograms of stars it had once flown past, alien cities it had seen from orbit, the songs of its creators, fragments of beauty buried beneath centuries of sorrow. Jack had watched all of it. He had seen the past the dragon had carried alone, a past full of war, commands, victories, and betrayal. But now, finally someone else shared the weight. He stood and stretched, his back still sore but stronger now. The bruises had faded, the cuts were healing. And most of all, he no longer felt alone. The dragon had become more than a ship, more than a project, more than a wounded beast. It was a friend, and today it wanted to fly again. Jack walked toward the flight chamber, boots clicking softly on polished floors that used to be cracked and bleeding. The lights around him flickered gently, playful, like a child's laughter. The dragon was excited. When he entered the bridge, the interface unfolded before him like petals of a mechanical flower, panels lighting up in sequence, star charts blinking open in the air, a green path drawn out into open space. "You ready?" Jack asked with a grin, placing his hand on the central control node. The dragon responded by powering up its engines, a deep hum rising through the floor, the sound of strength returning, of wings stretching. The outer hull shimmered as armor. Plates slid into place, weapons sealed away, wings folding neatly, not for war but for flight. They weren't going to fight today, they were going to soar. Outside, the nebula swirled like a dream, light particles flowing around the massive dragon as it rose slowly from the asteroid bed where it had hidden for weeks. The wings unfurled fully for the first time since its fall, casting a shadow across the clouds below. And then it moved. Wasn't just flying, it was gliding, dancing through space like it had waited lifetimes for this moment, weaving through stars and dust, its massive body curling, diving, twisting through gravity like a creature reborn. Jack stood at the front, window laughing, windless but breathless. "You're beautiful," he whispered. The dragon responded with a deep, rolling sound, something like a laugh, low, content. They drifted through the nebula for hours, the dragon's flight smoother than any ship Jack had ever known, the interface now lit with strange symbols and glowing shapes the dragon used to express emotions, excitement, wonder, even jokes. At one point, the dragon displayed a tiny hologram of Jack riding its head like a knight holding a frying pan as a sword. Jack stared, blinked, then laughed so hard he nearly fell over. "You've got a sense of humor now," he said, shaking his head. "That's terrifying." The dragon flickered the image again, this time with a crown on Jack's head. "Stop it," Jack grinned. "You're gonna make me emotional." But deep down, he was. This creature, once abandoned, feared, broken, now joked, now flew, now lived. They returned to the heart of the nebula just as the stars began to dim behind the fog. The ship slowed, settled gently onto a floating platform of ancient debris, and powered down without a groan. At peace, Jack leaned back in the pilot's seat, staring at the shifting sky. "You know," he said softly, "I don't think you were ever meant to be alone." The lights pulsed in reply, gentle and steady, like a heartbeat resting. Then, The dragon displayed something new on the wall beside him, a drawing made of light, rough and flickering. It was a picture, drawn in soft golden lines, of a human sitting beside a dragon, both of them smiling. Jack didn't speak for a while, his throat too tight, tears stinging his eyes. He reached out and touched the image. "Thank you," he whispered. For the first time in his life, Jack didn't feel like just a mechanic, not just a fixer of broken things. He had helped something feel again, he had helped something live again. And now, as the stars turned silently above them, one thing was certain. The saddest dragon in the galaxy would never be sad again, not while Jack was aboard, not while they were together, and somewhere in the distant stars, a new legend was already beginning to spread, of the warship that smiled and the human who made it happen.